Hello and welcome to the PowerSwitch, gaming's call-in talk radio show. My name is Peter Spezia, and today is March 13th, 2017. This is the 16th episode of the podcast. Thank you for tuning in. We use Discord as a means to add and drop callers to talk about video games and switch the power that's found in a typical gaming podcast. You can join our server to participate during recordings at rhymeswithasia.com/call. So here I am in another hotel room. It seems to be the norm for this show, at least this early part of 2017. I'm traveling a lot for work. This time finds me outside of Atlanta, Georgia. Very different show today. A lot of people, it seems, in the past week throughout the games industry have been playing The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. And I wonder if it's to the point where they've decided to stop making news. That's okay, get out of Nintendo's way, that's fine. But unfortunately, other news stories have kind of taken its place, and it's kind of led down a dark realization. It's not something that has been new, certainly, but it's been building. And I usually structured these open parts of the show pretty well. But I wanted to kind of open today to talk about a failure to communicate within the games industry and its enthusiasts and the press, and it's becoming more and more of an issue. And I think it's something that has to be brought to all of our collective attentions. And it's mostly something that I wanted to just kind of be really loose and open and vent about before opening the floor up to you, the callers, and we can kind of have a catharsis together in a way. So it really struck home with me today when I'm out doing a video shoot and I come back pretty much almost immediately to the news that Colin Moriarty has left Kinda Funny. And for those of us here, most of us, I imagine, follow the Kinda Funny community. I mean, their rise within the past few years has been nothing short of remarkable, and they represent what's best in the online community world. I mean, the positivity, the sense of community, and achieving great things. But it's a complicated issue when, lately, Colin Moriarty has, been very outspoken politically. And for some people, that's great. I mean, he provides a different voice, a conservative voice, but a very level-headed, smart voice. I mean, honestly, Colin is one of the smartest people I have listened to in the podcast space, one of the smartest people I've read. And while I don't agree with everything he says, I'll listen, and sometimes he'll change my mind on certain things. And I think that's only fair, and he would do the same. So if you've listened to Kinda Funny, you get a sense of who they all are, particularly who Colin is, because as he has mentioned in recent appearances on other shows, he's almost kind of the forebearer in a way for the conservative voice in the games media industry. And it's unfortunate that that's the case because many voices in that space feel like they cannot speak up for fear of being ostracized, criticized, what have you. But Colin is so confident in his beliefs that he can do so confidently. However, recently on Twitter, he made, I think, a joke in poor taste. It was a bit off color. I mean, it pushes the boundaries in a way. And I think that's a whole challenge in comedy as a whole today, especially with, YouTube. We saw with PewDiePie and his joke that was also seen in poor taste. And, the leaders that Kinda Funny, I mean, Greg, Nick, Tim, I mean, they had a disagreement with that, and that's fine. That's their prerogative. But it definitely caused ripples in that community, and understandably so. But it kind of brought up an issue where people should not be speaking to each other like that. People should not be tweeting at each other like that. People should not be making these lambasting posts on social media as a whole over something that was a joke. I mean, people may have not found it funny. If people found it so abhorrent, they could have easily unfollowed. But if you watch Colin Moriarty's content, he is not a sexist. He's not a bigot. And yet people, they find his politics so terrible, and that's why they can't watch Kinda Funny. They find it toxic on the community. They think, he's a sexist. He hates all women, even though he made the joke in the presence of his girlfriend and she laughed and, in a way, tacitly approved it. It's different perspectives, and people can have disagreements. That's fine. But the way we go and speak to each other, and it can be a vocal minority that certainly can be the case. I think most people online, I tend to believe, are good, but it's the vocal minority that, it ruins the bushel of apples, in a sense, for the rest of us. That's not the only situation, though, and that goes, a little bit more politics, and it's something that hits home personally to me. I mean, I was shocked to discover that, but in a way, I think it'll be good for Kind of Funny to grow and try new things, and for Colin especially. I mean, his appearances on those conservative or more leaning conservative shows. I mean, the Rubin Report on YouTube was on Glenn Beck Radio today. I mean, those will provide great outlets for him. He does seem to be someone that wants to get more into politics. He's been talking a long time, getting back into writing, and of course he's certainly passionate about games and a great games industry figure. But I think one that I will miss personally, because I was always interested in what he had to say about games. But he's a man with different passions in his life, and if he wants to follow those, then all the more power to him, certainly. But something that hits a little more home on the games industry front is Jim Sterling, a renowned critic, works on his own thejimquisition.com, but he's worked for Destructoid, The Escapist, other outlets in the past. And The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, yes, everyone's been playing it, but Jim Sterling got his copy at launch. He wasn't one of the embargoed media beforehand. That got a week before launch. So his review comes a bit later than the rest. And so, we've been talking, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, 98 on Metacritic. It's such a big accomplishment. Well, the game didn't really click with Jim Sterling as much. And Jim is someone who is a critic that is recognized by Metacritic. Jim gave the game a 7 out of 10. It's a good score. It counts as a good game, but you get this contingent of people who I don't think understand necessarily the purpose or even what a game review is. See, games are very subjective. It's probably the most subjective medium that exists in our space. I mean, you read a book, you can certainly have an imagination, but there are specific words on the page, and everyone will read the same words in a book. You watch a movie, everyone will watch the same film. They may interpret things differently, but it's that passive watching. When it comes to games, because of the input and the agency that people have with playing games, we may play the same game, but everyone will have a different experience. And certainly that is the case with an open world game that is just up to the player to learn and figure out things and discover new things, like The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. So I certainly, it seems, had a very different experience than Jim Sterling did, and that's fine. So Jim, with his experience as a critic, is certainly well within his right to give it a 7 out of 10. But it's the outrage, the fact that he got his site DDoS attacked, like that's a rational way to react. Oh, because Metacritic is now down to 97 for The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. If you talk to any game developer and say, well, your game is going to get a 97 on Metacritic, they would be over the moon. But you get this hardcore Nintendo subset that can't understand what criticism is really all about, and that it's okay to have different opinions about games, because it's something I'd like to try to at least preach on this show, is that games are subjective, games are art, and it's okay to have differing opinions. But we have to learn to communicate those differences with each other, not to call Jim every name in the book, to throw out the SJW term, which loses every sense of credibility that you have once you throw that term out, I would argue. There's got to be a better way. And then you have JonTron, the YouTuber, who, and it goes back in the political sphere. Something I disagree with has been how I think he's been making ill-advised tweets on not necessarily vocal support, but almost tacit support for the opinions of those from the alt-right wing of the political sphere. There have been a slew of examples, but one especially came to mind with Representative Steve King, and his quotes about we don't want America being rebuilt with someone else's children, paraphrasing and whatnot. It is frustrating to see someone that you've looked up to for years on YouTube to kind of go and implicitly agree in a way with these things, not, outright denial or disagreement. And there is the whole argument of, do you separate the media maker, their work with their beliefs? Can you keep those separate? I mean, many can't. That's fine. It's frustrating to see, but I don't think he necessarily deserves the level of hate in a way that's been leveled his way, because it all goes back to the core tenet and principle that kind of ties it all together for very online issues. I mean, you bring these subjects up to a variety of people, those who do not follow game news, those who do not follow those that are figures in the game industry, be it YouTube, podcasting, game criticism. These are very minor issues in the grand scale of things. Most people do not know who these figures are or care about the things that they say. And yet, for these very online issues, and the people that care about those, we are terrible at communication when it comes to showing our level of disagreement in a respectful manner. Just because we have that level of anonymity online doesn't mean, I think, we should get to use it to abuse others. While some of the views may be, in poor taste, or may be ill-advised and pretty disgusting, that doesn't mean you can say any four-letter word in the book. I think that it's particularly frustrating as we kind of sit at a crossroads here within the last week, within the last couple days, even just these sort of three stories back to back. I was going to talk mostly about game reviews, and particularly with Jim's case, because you have a lot of these people not only calling him just discussing names, but also questioning the whole bit about conspiracy in game reviews. And, Nintendo, by giving journalists the game a week early, they are paying them off for positive press. These people who then go, let's say, on Metacritic and post 0 out of 10 review scores on release day, because they've certainly played the game by that point. I was going to talk about a complete misunderstanding of game reviews in that sense, and it ties in a sense with the just vicious, venomous nature of how we communicate about a difference of opinion. But now it kind of extends into other gaming industry figures and kind of in the more political realm. And I mean, gosh, with the nature that politics has really gotten, it's become particularly nasty. And I wanted to share a situation where I had on Facebook. I mean, gosh, of all things. I mean, if you have those who have political views that are opposite to yours, that's fine. But what I find particularly abhorrent in this political cycle, and many of you I would imagine would agree, is the complete denial of fact, the complete twisting of fact. And one case in particular, it all goes back to fake news and the twisting of what some people say fake news is. I had a Facebook friend post an article from, of all sources, KnightsTemplarInternational.com. And those who play the Assassin's Creed series, that kind of raises some red flags. Yeah, we're gonna talk about Templars. Oh, okay, all right. The headline saying, Starbucks CEO, quote, "If you support traditional marriage, we don't want your business." Whoa, that's a pretty jarring headline there. I mean, that kind of sounds like there's no way the CEO of Starbucks said, "If you support traditional marriage, we don't want your business." I mean, that seems pretty ridiculous, right? Well, it's because he didn't say that, actually. And if you click through, like I was almost foolish enough to do, the quote basically said that if you do not support gay marriage, we don't want your business. So usually with these kind of things, I mean, yeah, you just don't engage, that whole kind of thing. It's fine, but I felt compelled to do so and to tell the person there's a big, big difference between not wanting a patron's business if he or she doesn't support gay marriage, which the article and quote is actually about, versus what the headline states. And I said, maybe next time it might be better to avoid deception through superficial headline reading. Is that so bad? I don't know. But the person didn't even want to have a conversation. They deleted the comment because they had posted a few days earlier that, oh, if you don't agree with what I have to say, I will delete what you have to say, because it is my wall, it is my Facebook profile. And if you don't like it, you can unfollow, you can unfriend. Figure, okay, if you don't even want to have the conversation, that's one way of going about it. Try to present what seemed to be a logical way of, presenting an alternative opinion. But if you don't want to do that, that's fine. I think it's just a big issue overall. A lot of people with politics especially, but for us in the game industry, for game enthusiasts, if you're listening to the show, if you're going to be calling into this show in a couple minutes here, you're obviously passionate about the subject of games. And we're starting to see it kind of leak over in an unsettling way into our industry. And we're people who have spent a lot of time online, have spent a lot of time with online communication. You'd think we'd be better at it. Kind of what I wanted to just get out there. I know it's probably running long. It's very loose. It's really structured, just kind of talking off the top of my head. But that is what I have to say. Now, when we come back, we will get to the callers. What do you think? I would love to hear your thoughts, but you can also bring up whatever gaming topic you'd like to discuss. I know that may be difficult with this kind of subject matter, but don't forget, you can also reply to what another caller had to say too. That's all when we come back here on the Power Switch. Welcome back to the Power Switch. I know it was kind of a heady intro and just, a lot of big sort of meta conversation, just talking to people with respect and communication. But let's try to swing it a little more back to games or, whatever you guys want to talk about. So we're getting to the callers here and let's get into it. Joining us from Kansas, Doba. Welcome back to the Power Switch.
How you doing?
Pretty good. How are you?
I'm doing all right. I move soon, so that's cool.
Oh, congrats. That's big.
Finally.
What's on your mind?
I'm here to talk about, it ties into a lot of how I feel about some people with franchises like Zelda, where they believe they are owed perfect review scores simply because of what they are. Now, I'm going to preface this by saying I'm playing Breath of the Wild. I made horrible life decisions in order to play Breath of the Wild. So
I know it's tough when you want to be in the conversation with games and you feel like you need to be a part of it. I think that's going to be part of a lot of this spring. I mean, I know we're both big into Persona 5 and we've been waiting a long, long time for it.
Too long, one would say.
Definitely too long, but it's part of that gaming life. I mean, what do you think about Breath of the Wild so far, just to kind of preface the conversation?
So personally, I really like it. I've been playing it most of my free time, though not the past couple of days because of packing and such. But it has problems. It has glaring problems. Not that I think they ruin the game or anything, because they don't. I'm still having a great time. It's super fun to get just about anywhere. The characters are all great. The world is beautiful. There's a million great things I could say about this game. 3 biggest issues are the Blood Moon is awful.
Yeah.
And I think it's actually broken. That has to be a bug. The way it works has to be a bug.
It's popped up too frequently for me, I think. Especially,
they can happen so frequently and they can happen at any time. That has to be a bug.
I think it may need some balancing in a patch.
The weapon durability, they went too far with it.
That definitely needs tweaking.
Like every single weapon in the game is made out of balsa wood. Each weapon lasts about maybe 3 enemies. 3 of the stronger enemies, at least.
At least for a lot of the starting weapons, yeah.
It's even some of the stronger weapons later on still, like, I know they probably last a little bit longer, but they don't last long enough that you can notice that they're lasting longer, and that's a problem.
Yeah, I had a Thunder Spear, which was like 22 power. It lasted a remarkably long time, which was just like, I was like, oh, this is a little more than usual, which, like, that shouldn't be the case. That shouldn't be the reaction I'm having to, like, oh, this is lasting longer than the rest of them have.
Yeah, and it just turns the whole like weapons section into an inventory management simulator, and that's just not fun. It's not fun. And then the last thing is it's always raining. It is always raining. Most of the time when you are halfway up a mountain and when it starts raining, you're just out of luck. There's no climbing for you anymore.
I get the explanation that, rain helps you explore more of the mountain roads and just like the roads to get there, not necessarily climbing directly up the mountain, but that's not how I approached it. I more just put the game down for a little bit.
Right now. Why would I go down to find a road?
Yeah, if it's like, I'm like, I need to get to a certain tower and the tower needs me to glide from a certain elevation. Well, I need to get to that elevation, and the only way is to climb the goddamn mountain. So
yeah, and especially with the game where climbing is such a big part of it, I don't know. Like, thank God rain does not affect Sheikah Towers, as I learned.
Yeah.
Or that would just be horrible.
Yeah, that's good.
So those are my 3 biggest issues with Breath of the Wild, and I haven't actually seen Jim's review yet. I haven't had time.
He mentions a lot of the same things, actually.
That it wouldn't surprise me. And Jim has been notable usually for being kind of a little more harsh than your average critic on games. I hear about him being more harsh than usual more often than not. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think we need a few critics that are a little more harsh than they need to be. It balances things out, certainly. But I don't think that the problem is so much the Metacritic score or that a lot of people like the game. I think it's a Zelda game. Mm-hmm. Zelda's an important big franchise. A lot of people really like Zelda. For some reason, some people have equated this to be Zelda deserves good scores, no matter what the problems are. A kind of very recent example of this was, I don't remember if it was last year. I think it was last year. I think GameFAQs did their best game of all time thing, or their top 100 games. I don't remember exactly what it was, but in the end, it came down to Undertale and Ocarina of Time.
Yeah, I think that was like a bracket sort of thing that they usually do. Yeah.
And Undertale won, and parts of the internet lost their damn minds because how dare this new game come out and unseat Ocarina of Time? 1, like it mattered. And 2, it really annoys me, and this doesn't just happen with Ocarina of Time. This happens with games all over the industry. Ocarina of Time is just where you see it the most, where I might not like Ocarina of Time, but I'm not going to fault anybody that does because it is very popular. It's extremely popular. It's considered one of the best games of all time. It is one of the most important games of all time.
Yeah, I don't see what's wrong with the whole perspective to have of, I may not enjoy this game so much, but man, I can respect it. Yeah, I mean, that's the case with me with Majora's Mask. I do not get along well playing Majora's Mask, but man, its story, its theming, and what it tried to do, that's impressive, and like that's awesome.
That's me with Ocarina of Time. That's me with The Last of Us. It's me with the entire Uncharted franchise. I might not like them, but I can respect what they are. I can respect what they do. In Ocarina of Time's case, it's basically if your opinion is that Ocarina of Time is anything short of a perfect masterpiece that is untouchable and frozen in time and perfect and flawless, people start frothing at the mouth. Mm-hmm. And like Ocarina of Time is the best example of that. And I know there are other games that do it. I can't bring up any other examples off the top of my head because this is the one that's happened to me most of the time. Because when I was first playing Ocarina of Time, every time I brought up a problem, and it's nobody close to me, but a lot of people would basically say, no, shut up. The game is perfect. You're just playing it wrong, or you're just bad at it.
I find a lot of the times that it's games that were remarkable and broke new ground years ago. I think it's a good point that, people see The Legend of Zelda, and, often with 3D Zeldas, and I guess this being the case, that maybe there is some Nintendo bias, ties with a lot of people's nostalgia. So maybe they gave Breath of the Wild a little more bump than it should. I think it also goes back to 10 out of 10 doesn't mean a perfect game. Yeah. It's a perfect score, but games are never going to be perfect. Games will have flaws.
There's no such thing as a perfect game for everybody because, for the exact reason that you brought up earlier, games are super subjective.
Mm-hmm.
What I love about a certain game, somebody else might hate.
Yeah, that's the case with Jim's review. I think people are freaking out way too much about 7 out of 10. I think it just all kind of culminates. I think it's a very good point that there are a lot of games that are rooted deep in nostalgia, and that doesn't make them untouchable.
Yeah,
and with certain series like Zelda, I mean, that may give I guess a little bit of bump to review scores because of that nostalgia, but that doesn't mean you can't critique it. I mean,
and I'm not saying that Zelda does not deserve the amount of respect it gets. It does. It very much does. That series is responsible for most of the industry as it exists today.
Yeah, I mean, you saw the Dark Souls tweet with I think we owe Nintendo Sensei a whole lot, or whatever they say. I mean, so that shows the respect in the industry, certainly.
So it definitely deserves that respect, but there is a difference between respect and blind admiration.
Good point. Doba, where can people find you on the internet?
Very soon, I will be back to streaming super frequently at Detective Dobaga. I've got to move first, and then me and my roommate Ben, who some people might remember from our old show, Read the Manual, will be streaming a lot more often. So look forward to that. We're looking at Yakuza streams and Nancy Drew streams and Tony Hawk streams and all sorts of stuff.
Excellent. People can find you on Twitter at the Dobaga. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hope the move goes well, and thanks for calling in.
Yep. Talk to you later.
Have a good one. Joining us from Indiana, Samson. Welcome back to the PowerSwitch.
Thanks. Great to be here again.
No problem. What's on your mind? What would you like to talk about?
Well, see, with all this stuff about Breath of the Wild, it brought to my mind another issue that isn't exactly new, but it is related. And that's the mob mentality that people get on the internet when hating a game or franchise.
Interesting. So we go from the adoration, and almost blindly so, to the opposite spectrum of hate. Interesting.
They're both very much so symptoms of the same thing. It's just love or hate. But like on the internet, for some reason or other, sometimes seemingly out of the blue, it's just like people decide that one game or franchise is the cool thing to hate on now. I mean, obviously Call of Duty became the butt of internet jokes, and Undertale, like after the rabid elitists praised it as the best thing ever.
Certainly,
the internet struck back with the claims that it and all of its fans are cancer.
Yeah, such a poor way of expressing the discontent, but absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, I've always disliked that throw around word on the internet. But anyway, my main example though that I've seen most often myself is Sonic the Hedgehog.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's the whole Sonic cycle, and there's some truth to it. But yeah, when you talk about series from our youth, and I actually saw it a lot, and not to bring it back to Zelda, but I saw the argument a lot with Zelda. But when you're talking about games from our past, and when it's rooted and steeped in a lot of nostalgia, when you see the argument, well, that game is for kids, or that game is for babies, I think that is bringing up a very immature argument that's not rooted in a lot of truth. And yeah, I mean, it's the same thing you see with Sonic throwing around. It's just like, if you're a Sonic fan, well, you're a furry. And it's like, what good does that do?
Yeah, that's just utter nonsense. Yeah, and like I see it a lot in like YouTube comments and videos and stuff. Like people just claim that the whole entire Sonic franchise is crap. Now, obviously, that's not true, or at least they usually think that all the 3D ones are bad. But just one person starts saying stuff, and then the whole mob just comes out, and if you imply that Sonic games are somehow anything more than utter crap, then once again they get their pitchforks out and call for blood.
It is ridiculous.
And like even see myself, I've been a Sonic fan since before I can even remember. The first game I played was Sonic the Hedgehog 2 on the Sega Genesis, but I'm not, a blind admirer like Doba, who mentioned, about these fans of Breath of the Wild. And trust me, I will be one of the first to come up and say, that I very much so dislike Sonic 06.
Right?
If it comes up. But hey, there might be someone out there that actually enjoys that. You know what? That's fine.
But at least you can, for that game, you can critically say, well, the game was rushed. They were trying they're trying to meet the anniversary, and they failed to do so. You have all the glitches. Like, there are legitimate flaws to that game, but when you're saying something like all 3D Sonic games are bad, and I think it's fair to say, Sonic Generations, pretty good 3D Sonic game.
Oh yeah, that one.
I personally had a lot of fun with it, but when you start throwing out blanket statements and then you can't defend it and you just say, well just because it is bad. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
There needs to be some sort of conversation there.
And you can't even reason with these people
right,
a lot of the time.
Right.
Like it's like trying to explain to someone why 1 plus giraffes doesn't equal orange. It just doesn't. You can't convince them not.
But in their mind, that math checks out.
And to be fair, I've also seen a lot of responses to those angry mobs that I'm also not proud of personally as a Sonic fan. And it goes back and forth. Nobody's perfect, and to be honest, it's hard for even me. It's hard for me to stay, neutral and reasonable as I try to be. But
right. We're all passionate about games, and I think we just need to do better. Like it, and it may be difficult sometimes, but we deserve that to the art form that we love so much, the medium that we spend our free time with. We deserve to do better. Well, Samson, thank you so much for calling in. Where can people find you online?
Well, you can find me and my brother, mostly my brother, at our Twitch channel, S Factor Streaming, and its associated Twitter, S Factor Stream.
Great. Well, thank you so much for calling. Really appreciate the time, and have a good night, man.
Yeah, thank you. You too.
Joining us from Texas, Exelev. Welcome back to the PowerSwitch.
Hello, Mr. Spasia.
How are you?
I'm pretty good. I've just been playing Breath of the Wild here for hours on end, not going through any dungeons.
Wow.
Yet.
You'll find the dungeons pretty interesting. They're different this time around, but I'm glad that people are having so much. Yeah, I'm glad people are having so much enjoyment just, getting the most out of that world. That's really good to hear. What did you want to talk about today?
Well, I was initially going to talk about some Joy-Con alternative ideas I could think of for the future that Nintendo could do, and I would still like to talk about that. But before I get into that, since we're in kind of like a political, opinionated atmosphere right now, I do kind of need to talk about the way certain things are going.
Certainly, yeah.
I don't want to be disrespectful to anyone here. I just wanted to mention, there's some things that are opinions, and then there's some topics where, human lives are on the line. And while it's not exactly a life or death situation, what I do see, when people say, cut Jontron some slack, yeah, I don't think it's going to achieve anything to, just blindly yell at him. But when people go out there, allowing alt-right into the gaming sphere, which has already been done, for sure, no doubt, but that makes the world of games less safe for people like some of my friends who are not white, who are transgender, who are, anything that's just, not a majority group. Or you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah.
While I don't think it's going to achieve much to be mad at people like that, it's okay to be mad, but I don't think it'll achieve much to, yell and be obscene towards people. I sort of get how it happens because, when you see people you care about who are on the ropes of suicide and just the way the world treats them, seeing one more person just contribute to that just kind of sets you off. And again, I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying I sympathize. And
yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I vehemently disagree with what he's been tweeting and what he has to say.
Definitely.
But there comes to a point where if you're not going to be able to have that kind of conversation with him, you're not going to necessarily change his mind. I mean, there are certain things where people are so rooted, and if he's going to be very stubborn about it, then it's probably best just to disengage.
Right.
Unfortunately,
I just don't watch him anymore. I've got other people I can watch.
Yeah, exactly. The media landscape is diverse enough, certainly, but I think it's a very good point, and thank you for bringing that up, because people get certainly very passionate, and when there are those kind of stakes online, that is understandable. But I think when it comes to those who find something to be offended just to be offended, granted it is a subset, but there are some people like that who find things, I think, to be just, let's find the new thing to direct all our anger at. Like, that's just no way to live your life online.
Yeah. On the topic of game reviews, I actually was just thinking about that, and I think the reason why you see some people get defensive or offensive over the way certain games are scored and things like that is there's kind of a logic to it. Like, if you like something, that means that is your taste. And if someone in a figure of authority does not like it, then that implies that maybe, the brain would interpret it this way, that maybe there's something wrong with you if you enjoy this. Again, that's clearly not true, because that's just how certain tastes work, and especially for video games, because video games, especially open world games like Zelda, are going to be very subjective and not objective.
Yeah.
But that doesn't stop people from feeling that way and getting irrational over it. It happens to me, in fact, and I know better than it. I don't act on it because I know it's wrong. But certainly it is something that people do just because I think there was a study that actually showed that people attach themselves to things like political views and media they enjoy. And when something they enjoy or agree with is not doing well, then it feels like an attack on them. And what's hard is I don't even really know what we can do about this. The first step is to admit that that's the problem, and that we can't just approach a topic logically. We got to actually think about the humanity of people, and that people are rational people, and it's hard.
It is so complex, and I know it's a lot of what we're going over today, and it would be easy just to say aren't games great, but it's just with certain topics, I think you're right. It takes a certain kind of maturity to realize that is a kind of dissonance that exists. I think it also takes a certain level of maturity to realize that yes, even though you may feel those slightings, it takes restraint to not act impulsively on it. I think that's important, but it also goes back to there's also the study, and there's got to be a name for it, but it's escaping me at the moment, where when you're presented, facts of something that exists and it goes against your worldview, and we're certainly seeing it in some of the Trump fake news supporter camp, but when you're presented with facts and it goes against your worldview, you double down even harder. You don't, say, oh, you're right, you've presented the truth and that must be the case, now I'll change my mind. You're going to say, well, no, clearly that's wrong because I am right, and therefore I'm going to just, bury this kind of hatchet, just, kind of double down even further. That's also a tough thing to break.
There is a name for that. It's called the backfire effect.
There you go.
I was thinking, people will act on things like emotions like that because some people have less self-esteem than others, and like I said, just kind of attaches to some people's identities and some people's self-esteems. And I think in the gaming sphere, which is a not anti-social, but definitely a community that is less based on socialization than others, so certainly changing with online groups and things like that.
Yeah.
But when you have that kind of thing, you have a lot of people who don't have a lot of good self-esteem, and I'm going to be the first to admit that includes me too. I'm guilty of this at times. Then people are going to be less resistant to irrational behaviors.
It's all very complicated. I think you've put it wonderfully. I mean, it really shows a lot of the complex struggles that we kind of all go through as game fans, game enthusiasts. But I think it takes think one, it takes understanding that these sort of complexities exist, and I'm glad you've brought some of them up. But it also takes diligence to, as I said before, to be better, to understand that it's okay to have the disagreement of opinion, that you don't have to wrap up your self-worth in the media you enjoy. It's there for you to enjoy, but there is a you outside of the media you enjoy, and that's okay. The two can be distinct. It's a tough show topic to have. It's a tough show topic to talk about. But when we have several stories like these, just back to back, and it just feels like it's growing, especially with the American political landscape on top of everything else. I think it was coming to a head, and I wanted to kind of get it out there and just give a space for some catharsis for some people, just to kind of talk it out. So I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I really don't know what to do about this kind of thing, but I know what the first step is, and that is to admit that this problem exists.
Yeah.
And once we get that idea out there, someone a lot smarter than I am is going to think of a good idea.
Yeah. I think
Maybe
that
not one individual person, but yeah.
I think it's a very good way of putting it.
Yeah.
Well, Exelev, thank you so much for your call. That was great. Now, where can people find you on the internet?
Nowhere. I'm hidden at all times. I am the night.
All right. Well, thank you so much for calling. Have a great night. Thank you for your call.
I will. Thank you.
Joining us from Michigan, Scott, welcome back to the Power Switch.
Glad to be here, Pete. How's it going?
Good. Been on the last couple episodes, and good to have you back on this one as well. What's on your mind?
So I think the issue that we're seeing a lot with the JonTron, with the Colin Moriarty issue, is one that's being seen really in media and the world, period, today. It's that people take so much offense by people disagreeing with them, which is intrinsically wrong. Instead of striking up a debate or a heated conversation, it immediately goes to "you're wrong, I'm right," and just arguments. And with the Colin Moriarty and everything, I don't agree with his tweet and everything. And Kind of Funny Games actually did a very nice kind of send-off thing where they explained really what's going on and how a lot of the publications are portraying the situation in a much different light. But
yeah, it seems like it's been something that's been building for him for a while, and just that the tweet almost kind of just showed that he probably wants to be more political, but the gaming space isn't necessarily allowing for that. The position that the company is in, and its positivity, it's
Exactly.
kind of just creating this. Yeah, it's a big cycle. Yeah.
It was different. It was a different direction. Like Greg and Tim and they all said on their cast, Kind of Funny Live this morning, was just there's no hard feelings. Everything's amicable. I mean, Greg's still going to be living with Colin, so.
Yeah.
But it was just the direction that Colin wanted to go was different than the other founders of Kind of Funny wanted to go, and that's why they kind of decided to split.
Yeah, I mean,
probably was a bit of a match to light what has probably already kind of been building up, but
yeah, and the timing was all strange with PAX East that they just went on, and I think the Kind of Funny morning show this morning, or this afternoon for Eastern time, I think it did put everything really pretty well into perspective, and even Greg opened up their PAX East panel with the same kind of thing. It's just we have to be better to each other, and like it's certainly an admirable sentiment. But yeah, I mean they've always talked about a future at that company where they necessarily would be passing it down to almost the next generation in a way that they'd kind of take a step back more into maybe more of an administrative position, that they wouldn't always be in front of the camera. I think it's just a little shocking to that community that it happens so soon and in such an accelerated pace.
Yeah, but this whole with JonTron, I'm not super familiar with the JonTron and just what people have said here and the little quips on the internet and with the Jim Sterling review, but in terms of games, people are allowed to have their own opinions.
Mm-hmm.
Someone else's opinion doesn't devalue yours. And I think that's something people don't understand, and that they think it's a personal attack, an affront to them if someone's opinion or thoughts are different. Instead of striking up a conversation and trying to hear the other side and see where the other person is coming from, so much more could be learned and gained. It would be so mutually beneficial to both sides if it was a much more open thought process and conversation, which just doesn't happen anymore. And that's in all facets of media. And I think it's just recently becoming, I guess, more televised or more in the public eye, especially this past week with the games industry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely broadcast more. And you can argue, social media has had a part within the last several years to kind of help believe that everyone has a voice and that the voice deserves to be heard and it can be broadcast. And that's sure that all plays a part. But yeah, my conflict with it just makes me wonder that Exelev brought up a good point that, maybe there's a percentage of those enthusiasts of games who don't have as high of self-esteem and maybe they tie up their identities in media. But I see it as, we've seen it in the political landscape and, we've seen, perhaps our parents, our extended families, family friends, things like that, when they don't have as much of experience with online communication and they have difficulty disagreeing with these political opinions, that's fine. But, for our generation, those of our age and who have really grown up in a way online, with these different media passions that we have, we should be better at that. We should almost be, in a way, the standard bearers of how to communicate online, but we so aren't. And if you look at those younger, arguably it's worse because they're taking from the poor example that some of us are setting. And it's such a vicious cycle, and I'm not sure what to do.
What's baffling to me is our generation, the younger generation, is much more open to things like transgendered individuals and gay marriage and people of different religions and races, things like that. We're fine with that, but we get so butthurt that comedians are afraid, like they won't go to college campuses anymore because everyone is so up in arms about the kind of more racy and politically insensitive jokes that they say. It boggles my mind that we can be so accepting of some things, but then simple jokes and things, millennials, and I'm a millennial,
we're on the older end of that spectrum.
We're on the older end of the millennials. And then the other people, they just get so butthurt. And it doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, and I think it is admirable while you compare it to past generations that this generation is more accepting. But yeah, when we're not accepting of basic differences of opinion, that's heartbreaking. And
it's like we're accepting of people, more accepting of people, but not more accepting of alternative viewpoints or like other people's opinions.
Not accepting of ideas, not accepting of facts.
Right.
The facts thing just makes me feel so disheartened.
And that's, I think, what has to change the most. And I have no idea how long or if it'll change, but I think just being able to understand that people can have opinions different from yourself and that's okay. And that it's fine to have a debate and just start a discussion. I think that's important.
Granted, we're not having any big differences of opinion here, certainly, but it's good to kind of spread this message that we need to communicate with each other. We need to be better about that kind of communication.
Right, and in terms of games specifically, because I've gone more into the broad range of the idea, but this is more probably geared towards the look at like the Zelda review and stuff. If someone doesn't like a game that you have played, just because someone else doesn't like that, don't let that take away from your enjoyment. Someone else's opinion doesn't make your experience any less enjoyable.
Yeah, I mean, you should be able to embrace, what that game made you think, what it made you feel. And just because someone with more critical experience had a different experience, that doesn't mean that it took away what you had, what the experience you had with that game. That's a good point.
An example that I personally can relate to with that is Mass Effect 3. After the ending, so many people, it's like, oh, it's such ending sucked. It completely ruined everything for me. And I was like, I had so much fun with like the emotions and feelings of Mass Effect 2 and the suicide mission and everything that I went through. Yeah, the ending was a bit lackluster and let me down, but that didn't take away from my enjoyment. And people saying how crappy they thought the series was now after the ending. It's like it didn't take away from the moments that I had with it. And I think that's just something people have to hold with them. Love something as much as you want to. Someone else not liking it doesn't detract from you liking it or make you liking it wrong.
Yeah, the Mass Effect 3 one is a great example. I mean, that series was all about the journey. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I feel the same way, and I felt the same way. It's like you have so many great hours with that game, and you're going to let the last 30 minutes invalidate all of it?
Exactly.
Man. And it's just Mass Effect Andromeda a week from tomorrow. Good Lord.
Oh, man. See, I made it topical because Mass Effect's coming out. See how I did that there at the end?
There you go.
Like how I worked that in?
I like it. I like it.
Thank you.
Scott, people can find you on dashingnerds.com, at SolidSnake120 on Twitter. What do you guys have going on at Dashing Nerds?
Well, we got the latest episode of Time Hops went up last Friday, and we have a really good review for Danganronpa 1 and 2 Reload coming out tomorrow by some pretty good writer, I gotta say. You might want to check it out there, Peter. You and him might share some views.
I do look forward to reading that review that I wrote that you were generous enough to hook me up with that. Yeah. So thank you for hooking me up with that opportunity. It's always fun to write a review for your website there. Yeah, it was really a lot of fun to do, and I recommend people check it out. I mean, that game, Danganronpa 1 and 2 Reload, I mean, that's really the ideal place to start if you're new to the series and you've been wanting to play it on PlayStation 4. Nothing really too different from the Vita versions, certainly, or even the Steam versions. But if you're wanting to play it natively on PS4 with the graphic boost there, check it out. I mean, I love those games. Like it's great. But definitely check out the review that I wrote over on dashingnerds.com by the time this episode goes live.
Yep, it'll be there.
All right, Scott, thanks so much for calling in. Really appreciate the time.
Thanks for having me, Peter. Have a good night.
You too. And joining us from Indiana, Logan, welcome back to the PowerSwitch.
Hey, Peter. Thanks for having me once again.
No problem. From the Millennial Gaming Speak podcast, I know I just tuned in to your podcast right before. People can check you guys out on SoundCloud and YouTube. Having a similar discussion, so I wanted to tune in to hear what you guys had to say. And I'm curious, what did you want to bring to the show here today?
So a lot of similar points that Scott brought up before. So I think he stole a lot of my thunder with his last segment. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, I mean, it's just been an odd week. And I think that shows like yours are really important during this time, that gaming fans can come together and actually have a conversation and talk to one another. And I know that that's kind of the entire purpose behind your show, is that you can bring people on to actually speak and have full-length discussions rather than just forum posts or something like that. And so
that means a lot. Thank you.
Yeah, your show's working best when things like this pop up in the industry. So, but yeah, it's just been a strange week, and I'm tired of. I think it's been heightened because I am so much more a part of the kind of funny community and that group of people more than I am any other group on the internet. So it's been a strange past week, and as you said, things just did get heightened so quickly in that group, and it's kind of came out of left field, honestly.
Yeah, likewise. I mean, I definitely wanted to get your opinion as someone who is a best friend of that community, and where's your head at with all of it?
I knew it was coming. See, that was the thing. Like I'm pretty active over in the Facebook group, and I had been talking to some people last week, and I said this exact thing before the whole tweet debacle happened. As soon as I saw him, Colin, that is on the Rubin Report last week, I was like, he's cut out for this. Like, he is made to enter the political realm in some way. He's already expressed that he's kind of getting burnt with games. He's already tired of his peers screaming at him back constantly on Twitter and subtweeting about him. Like, you could tell it was just wearing on him. And then that, in addition to the fact that he never really went to the conventions much anymore, like, it was obvious that he was, which obviously he's talked about at length because he has anxiety and he doesn't like to go to them because of that. But I think part of it is he just doesn't want to be around that many people, and he's just kind of tired of that part of the industry, I think. And so it was glaringly obvious to me that he was going to do this at some point. I thought maybe 1 or 2 years down the road, not this week. So it caught me off guard today for sure.
And then you talk about, again, it all goes back to those who watch kind of funny content versus those who think they know Colin Moriarty.
Exactly.
It's a huge difference. I mean, those who watch the content knows that he always talks about, like, it's important to have your passions outside of gaming. I mean, he's working on a novel, and he's always had that interest to possibly go back and be a professor, and he has all these different passions in his life where he still loves games, obviously, but when he mentions that people get on his case, oh, you're not playing enough games, and like, I'm playing more games than ever before. It's things like that you can totally understand where he's coming from. And I've been seeing people on my Twitter feed definitely with a lot of nasty subtweeting and saying they're like, oh, like, this is why, like, he's the worst thing in the gaming industry, and good, get rid of the toxic nature from Kind of Funny, and like, this is why he has to go. It's his politics that are so toxic. Like, that's not it at all. I don't think you listen, and maybe something he said once burned you forever, but Colin Moriarty is one of the smartest people I've come across online, through and through, and he's a genuinely good dude, and like, I wish him the best, honestly, for what he does next. But man, I wonder, and I almost want to have the conversation, but when you have that hard and fast line that the worst period, like, there's no talking with that.
Yeah, the subtweets from people, specifically like Arthur Geese, saying, "Oh, I can't wait to see the bidding war Breitbart gets into," like, trying to, it's just stupid stuff like that doesn't make any sense at all. And the point I was trying to come up with the topic
the Bob Mackey thing too.
Yeah,
and,
Bob Mackey.
God,
that guy's an asshole. I really hate Bob Mackey. Yeah, I hope he listens to this show randomly just so you can hear that. I just don't get, my topic coming into this, I guess, was the character assassination angle of it by your peers. And obviously Colin didn't work with these people directly one-to-one. Some of them he did, not all of them. And I know he's kind of burned a lot of people last week with the whole tweet. But regardless, it's just been baffling to me how many, like, to the furthest extent, how people portray him. Like, it's insane. Like, he is not a crazy white right-wing person. And even if you, I won't go that far.
Yeah, I mean, but when you're right. When people say, like, oh, well, he's a Trump supporter and I can't wait to see what position he has in the cabinet, like, have you ever listened to him talk about politics? Really?
That's what I don't understand. And I think it's sad that the games media people, obviously it's not all of them subtweeting about him. It's not the world against Colin Moriarty, but sometimes it does seem like that, as crazy it sounds. And I like, NeoGaf was having a field day with him today as well. It was
that was really bad,
insane to go look at. But yeah, I've just always felt so bad for the guy, but I've looked up to him so much at the same time, because as we mentioned on our show tonight, like, he mirrors sentiments that I have that aren't popular. And I appreciate him for speaking up and having the courage to say those things where I feel like, I know I wouldn't have the courage to say those things. Heck, I don't like being controversial on my own podcast sometimes. and we don't have a listener base of hardly any people. So it's, I just feel bad for him. And I feel like him getting out of the industry is a good thing. But the other kind of spin I want to put on this is me being a prospective person who would like to get into the industry in some way, whether it be public relations or writing about games for one of these big outlets, or doing some sort of producer job, whether it be audio or video, whatever, anything like that. I am just so spurned when I see the reactions that people have to one sole individual being a little bit more outspoken than others and having some opinions that aren't as popular. I am so just thrown off by wanting to enter this industry at all, if that's the way your peers treat one another. Like, the people I interact with on the internet, I try to treat with respect and love, like I do all other people that I run into on a daily basis. And
man.
Even if you don't like agree with the guy, and heck, a lot of these people probably go back with Colin a lot longer than we realize, and maybe they have specific reasons to dislike him. That's fine. But I just think the overall hatred is out of control in some respects with this guy. And it makes me lose my passion and drive to try to get in there myself, if that's the way I'm going to be treated if I speak my mind. So
that's tough to hear. I hope that it gets better so that, you don't feel like you have to censor yourself. And I think that was probably part of what he was feeling. I know, some of the sentiments on the Kind of Funny morning show, they were saying, part of it was just that, well, you can't control me. And it's like, yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
And so you shouldn't feel that way. But at the same time, it is the whole aspect of free speech, and we're allowed to say whatever we want to say, but what we say has consequences or may have consequences, and that's all part of it. And Colin knows that more than anybody with his knowledge of the Constitution, of politics, of history. I mean, my God, no one else would know it more, I think.
Yeah. The one last thing I did want to ask you about, because I know you've kind of been around Kind of Funny since this whole all began. How are you feeling about the community itself now? Because I think it's getting pretty toxic, honestly. Like these issues, this high school drama issues, it seems like have been popping up a lot more recently. And it's just getting to the point where something like today happened. And I don't think the community egged that on by any means. I think this was bound to happen at some point or another. And I think this whole situation that's occurred with this tweet over the past week was more or less the catalyst that kind of got it to that point earlier than maybe it would have happened on its own. But I think my problem with even the Kind of Funny community right now is it seems so divisive. Like everybody was taking a side this past week, the hashtag I support Colin Moriarty and all this stuff. Like, look, I don't know. I was on both sides of the whole event last week, but I was not tweeting out hashtags and saying Greg betrayed Colin. Like there's all this manufactured drama amongst the community.
The whole Tim betrayed Colin thing.
Tim betrayed him. Yeah, that
drives me nuts. Yeah. Yeah.
So I think the community at this point is becoming more damaging than it is good. And that's really sad since you and I think we're both in on that community at the ground floor and saw what it used to be and now seeing what it is now. It's disappointing, and it proves that to me in the end, the internet mob mentality is always going to win out, which is just sad because that community was really special.
It really was. Yeah. I mean, it still is special in a lot of ways. Let's put it that way. It still is special.
Yeah, it definitely is.
But
there's a lot of great people that I've met through that community. Alex O'Neill, who I know you had on your show a few weeks ago. People like him who I've collaborated with or talked to or have become some of my closest friends. Like I've met through that community. So it is still very special, but it's not what it once was.
You're right. There was a kind of purity to it back then. The pure one, the pure community. But
exactly.
I wonder if some of it's the whole thing of it takes a few spoiled apples to rotten the cart. It doesn't take much to kind of whip up that kind of frenzy, and I wonder if is part of it the Rooster Teeth infusion of when they get out there more, when the Kind of Funny community makes itself more known, people are going to take more notice. Some people will like and appreciate what they have to offer, but some people will maybe be jealous of it or want to tear it down, and it's kind of to show there's still like a dark side in everyone to it, or something of that nature. So I wonder, with all of the different things that they've done, and that community has grown so much, Greg, Colin, Tim, and Nick, they've gone to do so many amazing things, whether it's something like Kind of Funny Live, or it's Greg and Tim doing the Final Fantasy 15 event, or Greg's speech at the Game Awards is the big inflection point too.
Greg just hosted the Dice Award.
That too. I mean, so I wonder if it's new people discovering the community and not necessarily realizing what it's based on, and then just falling back on these habits that's creating some of these culture issues that we've been discussing, that they fall back to the mob mentality. They fall back to poor, immature ways of communicating with others online. And it doesn't take much to get that all riled up. So I wonder if that's the case. And I think they had a really, really powerful, important topic. It was several months ago. But they were talking about how when you become so invested in a community that you feel like you own it and that you are owed something. And it's possible, I would say, that maybe people have distorted Kind of Funny's message in their own ways so that it fits what they want it to be, as opposed to what it actually is.
I think I would have to agree to that to an extent. I think that's easy to see over just how everything's evolved over the last year. The sad thing that bringing it back to Colin real quick is that because as the community has become a bit more toxic, I feel like Colin has been singled out as the one to place that blame on, because when you look at it, I mean, they continue their typical narrative of we're all best friends. We got to be good to each other. It's not like they're deviating from that.
Right.
But where the negativity would creep in would be Colin's topics or things like that on their various shows. But he wasn't being negative. He was just having a conversation about controversial things, whether they be Donald Trump or just anything. Like, he was always willing to push the envelope of their content whereas the others weren't, I felt.
Yeah. And when he brought up the idea before the election of how, bringing up the stories of how there's that contingent of in rural populations, especially middle America. Yeah. Like, it's a totally valid point. But then when people totally just deny what he says and said, well, you're a Trump supporter, and when that comes up, it's just
he's a Trump apologist. He's trying to give Donald Trump a platform and apologize for all the people who did vote for him.
When he left the Republican Party because of what Donald Trump did and perversed it, like. There's certain ideas that are just incongruent, but yeah, I think you're right. It is important to see those alternative perspectives, and I know I've been having you on for a little longer than maybe some of the other guests, but it's the kind of funny news struck me particularly hard today. I mean, I'm coming back from this video shoot that got called for rain, and like I get struck with it on my timeline pretty much immediately, and like it was shocking.
Like, I was sitting at my desk at work and it felt like my dog had just got run over by a car or something like that, which is it's an insane thing to say. It really is. And a couple distance from it, I'm like, all right, maybe that's a little dramatic, but like, I feel like I do spend 5 to 10 hours a week with these guys in my ears. And I mean, that's probably pretty accurate. Like, I listen to these guys like clockwork every single week. I would eat lunch every week and I'd listen to PS I Love You. That was just a thing that was a part of my schedule every single week. And so it's strange how these voices in your head become so familiar to you, and you do get to know them so well. And I feel like that's why I'm comfortable speaking or analyzing this whole situation to the degree that we are, because in a sense we do know them.
Yeah, I mean, their best
that's
friend.
The whole kind of funny moniker. Exactly.
Yeah, the best friend mantra rings true for a reason. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Logan, people can check you out on Millennial Gaming Speak, along with your co-host, Max Roberts. That's on YouTube. That's on SoundCloud. That's on iTunes. Go subscribe, review, all that good stuff. But otherwise, people can find you on Twitter at moreman12.
That's correct. And you can find my written work on dualshockers.com. I've got something cool coming later this week that you may want to check out. Hopefully it's up later this week. We'll see. But yeah, you can find written work there, and then keep an eye on Millennial Gaming Speak because we're rebranding, sort of. So keep an eye out for that in the coming weeks, whenever that is. I have no idea.
Very cool. Always a delight to have you on, another podcaster, someone who I can communicate, empathize well with. It's good to kind of get the kind of funny venting off the chest a bit. So yeah, really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Feel free to. We'll try to get you back on our show here soon. I know we said we'd try to do that once the Switch was out. So.
Oh, that'd be cool. I'd appreciate that. Thanks.
So,
all right, have a good night, man.
You do the same. Take it easy.
All right, guys. Thanks so much for calling in. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit about what I've been playing. I've beat a certain game that many of you have been playing, and it seems like the whole industry. We'll talk about The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, spoiler-free, what it's like to beat the game. We'll talk about that when we come back here on the Power Switch. Welcome back to the Power Switch. This week's tempo control music is brought to you by Hotel Dusk Room 215. You can find a new video game music top 10 list from a specific game soundtrack every Tuesday over at youtube.com/rhymeswithasia. Now, what am I playing recently? Well, I finished The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, and yeah, it took me over 35 hours to beat, it seems. I had an estimation, then had Matt, has called in the show before. I had him look up my Switch profile that I did not see when the activity log had popped. I left my Switch at home because so my wife could play Breath of the Wild, and I guess it's 35 hours or more. Now, granted, I could have spent a lot more time on that. I did 36 shrines. I had probably only like 20 some Korok seeds. I did all 4 dungeons. I did all that. It's a matter of I wanted to beat that game because we are in that spring onslaught of games. So it feels good to beat in the game. I did all of the memories, and that was a weird one because one of them takes place in the Hyrule Castle area. So like you're making that final assault, you're trying to, climb and approach that end part of the game, but you have to stop and get this memory. Oh, but then you have to go talk to Impa because you've collected all 12. And then she gives you one more. And, I think it's worth investigating and doing because it does unlock an extra post-credits scene. Adds a bit more closure. When you get the Master Sword, sorry, it's not a spoiler that the Master Sword is in this game. I'm sorry. When you do all 4 dungeons, I had a very good, complete ending. Wasn't reminding me to do anything else. We had Ken last week call in and say that there's a possibility of multiple endings, and I suppose that's true in a way. I mean, but it depends on all the things that you do. So I definitely recommend doing all that, at least when you get to the point of progressing to that final area. I think it's the best Zelda game I have played, but I don't think it's my favorite. And I think that we talked about it in a previous show where it's an important distinction where you can talk about quality of a game, but your favorite is tied in nostalgia and where a game hit you at a certain point in time. So I think my favorite still will be Wind Waker, but I would feel totally fine putting Breath of the Wild at the moment in my top 5 favorite Zelda games. It's probably the best one I played. Like there's some really good stuff to it. I'm not as bothered by like things like the weapon durability as most people are. It is a nuisance at times, certainly, but it's okay to deal with. It all builds in that survival, and you are a very, very small part in the world. You will die a lot. It's very difficult, but it's all part of the game. And so it's a different Zelda game in that regard. But I think when I'm talking favorite Zelda games, it's something I can do in, 10, 15, 20 hours, not 35. And that's if I'm not exploring even a fraction of the content that the game has to offer. So now I have about a week of time until Mass Effect Andromeda comes out on the 21st, a week from tomorrow when I'm recording here. So I had Battlefield 1 come in through Gamefly, the rental service. So I may be going through that pretty quickly. Also Severed on PlayStation Plus. I'll probably be starting that one on the plane ride home, get through Severed, maybe play Battlefield 1 through a weekend, and then it'll be Mass Effect time. I'm really, really looking forward to that. Anyway, just kind of wanted to touch on things and just what it feels like to beat Breath of the Wild. I'd say absolutely, enjoy all the time you're spending with Breath of the Wild. It's worth not rushing through to savor everything that you're doing with it. But try to get all those different things before you get to the ending. I mean, it's certainly possible. And when you beat the game, it kind of spits you back out to your last save. You have a star by your save file. You can go do more things. You can then eventually challenge the boss later again and try for that. But if you're looking for the kind of the best ending off the bat, you got to make sure you're kind of hitting all the checkpoints. You do all the dungeons. You get the Master Sword. You get all the memories, even the 13th. So worth doing, I say. Really, really enjoyed Breath of the Wild, but I cannot wait for the next one, for Mass Effect Andromeda. Next big game in the spring onslaught. And that'll do it for this episode of The Power Switch. We are hosted by RhymesWithAsia.com, and we are on YouTube and Twitch at RhymesWithAsia. Find us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at The Power Switch. You can email us any questions, concerns, comments, or opportunities at powerswitchpod@gmail.com. You can subscribe to The Power Switch on podcast services such as iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher. And if you could be so kind as to leave a review, that would really help as well. Most importantly, to participate in future episodes, you should join our community on Discord by visiting rhymeswithasia.com/call. It's a small but growing community, and in these early months of the show, it'll be easier than ever to have your voice heard on this podcast. If you want a YouTube video to watch, I would say check out Colin Moriarty on The Rubin Report. If you don't know much about who Colin is and you're curious what all of that kind of funny talk was about, I think that's a good kind of briefing to see his position in the games media industry versus, what he thinks about politics, what he thinks about games, how it kind of all fuses together, and, why some people may not like his politics, but some should at least understand who he is before they start throwing baseless and honestly false accusations at him. Honestly, He's a brilliant mind. I can't wait to see what he does next. But I think that's a good video to watch if you're looking to kind of learn more about this sort of subject. I know I said I'd line up a guest for last weekend. Some personal stuff got in the way, planning for this trip. I'm going to hope to line up one for this coming weekend. I'll be back in town. Hopefully everything goes well and smoothly. But, stay tuned on that. Check out our Discord channel as that develops, also on Twitter. Now, regardless, whether it's live or on your own time, I look forward to you joining us for our next episode. With that, I'm Peter Spezia. Until next time, switch up, call in, game on.